Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
Well, it's a great pleasure again to have Alex Dreyfoos, who is many things, but we're discussing pretty much now his authorship of Passion and Purpose, and he happens to be calling from cold New York, as he was saying. So, Alex, you find yourself up in winter, huh? In New York?
Well, hardly winter. It really gets much colder than this in late September, early October, but I've never seen it this cold in June. We are at about 1,600 feet in the Adirondack Mountains. Just a surprising cold wave at this point, but nevertheless clear and beautiful.
Oh, good. Well, that's important. So you just put a good jacket on. And now, what about your boat? Is your ship is in the Bahamas, though? Is that where you keep it?
Well, right now it's in Palm Beach at Rivovich. We've put more than 100,000 nautical miles on it, and that means time for an engine rebuild, and that's what's going on right now. That should be finished by the end of the month, and at that point, we'll head up the East Coast with stops in Boston. I have some MIT friends who sort of have a mini Bohemian Grove get-together on Green Island in Maine. We call it Big Boys Camp, and be there for a week or so, and then we're going to head up to Iceland.
No kidding.
Spend a little time in Iceland, and then long term, I'm giving some thought to the Northwest Passage in 2017.
And tell me about the Northwest Passage. I've heard so much about it, but what would it require you to do?
Well, years back, you couldn't do it. Then more recent years, you had to do it with great difficulty, worrying about big ice blocks and stuff like that. More recently, as a result of global warming, for the last several years, there's been about a month or so when passage has been relatively smooth, and there are now a couple of cruise lines that are offering passage, and more than likely, I haven't looked into it in full detail, but my guess is I'll follow by a day or so one of the cruise lines and let them move aside any inconveniences.
And it must be very beautiful, and that's because you're seeing glaciers as you're traveling?
That's what I'm told. They're very interesting ice blocks and polar bears and other northern creatures. So an adventure, a new bucket list item.
Another, I love that bucket list. So would you be seeing the northern lights up there?
Yes, except for the time of year. The northern lights are generally more visible in March and September, and then of course it's not passable in those days.
Right.
In those periods. So I don't even think we'll see northern lights in our Iceland trip this year, which is a shame. I saw northern lights when I was a youngster up here in the Adirondacks a couple of times. But, that's still an item that I would certainly like to see more of and photograph.
Well, since you're a scientist, I'm going to ask you this about it. I've never really understood it. What are the northern lights? What causes them?
It's an ionization thing, as I understand it. But again, I would have to go back and do a little more research as I understand it.
Right. I know it's. I've seen them. I've seen it on television. I've seen it on the internet, but
right.
I don't really understand it.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. One can certainly see them on the internet.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Well, I want to get back and talk about passion and purpose. As a matter of fact, I was at the Kravis Center the other day, and there in a beautiful case are your books. And that's how they're selling a lot of them, other than, of course, we hope that some got sold since you were in Boomer Times. But I have spoken very highly about it. I do think it's a masterpiece, and I'm curious to think would you be writing anything more? Or did you complete everything you wanted to talk about in that book?
Well, the book ends with our having completed circumnavigating the world with Silver Cloud, which was my next to the last bucket list item. The last item on my bucket list was photographing hammerhead sharks underwater, which had been on my list for probably 40, 45 years.
Oh, my.
And while we looked for them in French Polynesia, in Fiji, and I think it's Yamato, another island, and in the Maldives, of all things, I finally found them in March off of South Bimini Island. And so I have some beautiful pictures of the hammerhead sharks, which had long been on my list. It got on my list dating back to the early 70s when I used to go to Walker's Key, which was the northernmost island in the Bahamas, which was a beautiful small resort. I was able to fly, had a small airport. I was able to fly in and kept a small boat there for fishing. And they had a gorgeous, this was the days when, sort of meat on the dock, and they stuffed fish, and there was a huge 16-foot hammerhead shark over the bar. I always thought, boy, wouldn't it be neat to see one of those underwater? So that's how it got onto my bucket list. And as I say, it was only in March of this year that I finally came across them underwater and do have some nice pictures of them. I don't think that's enough reason to write a book, another book, nor do I think Iceland or even the Northwest Islands will be enough. But who knows? The other thing that's happened since the book was, as you probably have read, we did get delivery of that organ, memorial organ to my former partner, deceased partner, George Morgan. And that was a beautiful concert and well received. And then we've had the second concert, the Young Singers of the Palm Beaches, did a gorgeous job with organ accompaniment.
So you're happy with that?
Things,
yeah.
Those are the things that have happened, but I don't think we're quite up to book 2 yet.
No, I don't think so, but things are going to come your way. They always do, and you're such an adventurer. I want to go back to the hammerhead shark. Did you, when you were down there in the Bahamas, in Bimini, so did you see a 16-foot one?
A little hard to determine their length. I would say probably not, probably 10 to 12 feet. But anyhow, they're a very impressive animal.
I was going to ask you, what is a hammerhead? Why are you fascinated with a hammerhead shark?
Well, it's a very unusual shark. I think most people would sort of recognize the picture. They have a very broad, straight head with eyes at the very end. It's not quite known why they're structured that way, although there's some evidence that they have electronic sensors on the front of them.
Huh.
But they're big and very different looking than nurse sharks and other sharks. I've been diving with all kinds of sharks, from tiger sharks to nurse sharks to white tips and black tips and gray tips and so forth. You see those all over the world. I was diving with Jim Abernathy, who is now world famous. He runs a Save the Sharks campaign, and I think he might be worth just a minute mentioning to your listeners. I think he's pretty well determined what the story with sharks. They're really not very dangerous if you understand them. In my pictures, you see quite a few small fish swimming around the sharks, and they pay no attention to them. And the reason they don't pay any attention to them is that they're faster than the sharks, and so they know that the sharks know they can't catch them. However, most fish are white underneath, as are sharks. And when a fish gets sick, they tend to lean on their side, and when they're quite sick, they almost swim horizontally, in which case the white of them is quite visible. And the feeling is that the sharks then go after them and know they can catch them. back to the human experience, there are occasional shark attacks from people walking in the surf. And of course, mostly white legs, and the fish and the sharks, I think, Jim and I both think, the sharks are just going after what they think is a wounded fish.
Huh.
So anyhow, Jim has all of his friends who go diving with him wear black swimsuits and black gloves, and in the case of my white hair, a black hat, or a hoodie, so to speak. And when you do that, the sharks pay absolutely no attention to you. I could show you pictures or videos when they're just, the sharks are just all around us and not paying the least bit of attention to us.
Well, that's very important news. Do people know that, or is that something that you all have just discovered?
No, I think Jim is starting to promote that, make the case. He's very well respected. He's done a lot of stuff for National Geographic, and he's written some books, and his videos are available and so forth. So I'm hoping more and more people will understand that. He's certainly taken a lot of people diving. He has a tiger shark that resides up off of West End, and that fish is so friendly. He comes up to Jim and expects Jim to, scratch his nose and so forth.
Huh, amazing.
Even these hammerhead sharks were very comfortable with Jim petting them and so forth. The reason they came right up to him, the way Jim attracts them is to have fish guts and heads in the plastic milk cartons, plastic milk cases that, people carry milk in, and just tie them together so the fish, the meat isn't available, but the blood and guts gets into the water, and because we're in the Gulf Stream carries the scent some distance, and that attracts the sharks. So they come up there hoping they're going to get fed, but they don't seem to be terribly bothered by the fact that there's nothing there.
See, that's a whole new discussion on sharks, because they would scare the life out of me.
Well, yes, until you spend 5 minutes watching their behavior.
Yeah, right. You're a very adventuresome person. I must say, is Renate, does she go underwater to scuba diving with you?
She enjoys snorkeling and has seen some beautiful things and has seen the sharks from the top, but no, she's not very comfortable with scuba gear.
Right, neither am I.
And I more recently have taken up rebreather scuba diving, which I find very interesting.
Wait a minute. What is it? What kind?
It is called rebreather. So normally, you have an air tank, and when you take in your air, and that's fine. And then when you expel it, it creates the bubbles that you typically see around scuba divers.
Okay.
Rebreathers, there's another tube, so when you exhale, that air goes back into a canister of chemicals that absorbs the carbon dioxide, which is what you exhale, and then it electronically measures the oxygen content, and then you have a second cylinder of pure oxygen, which is then added to bring the air back to the same consistency. Actually, it adds oxygen as you go further down, which also minimizes the possibility of you getting the bend. So, bottom line, the beauty is you're just there with no bubbles coming up, and that really puts the fish at ease, and they just are all around you and pay absolutely no attention to you.
That is great. There's never something that you're not interested in that's usually on the cutting edge, that's different. That's your science mind that you have. I don't know if you were born with it, or of course, because living with a father like you did and all the schooling that you went to, but that is, I always find out these unusual things from you, whether it's that unusual orkin the organ or of course now the rebreather, the rebreathing. It's called a rebreather, scuba diving?
A rebreather. Yeah.
Rebreather
technology, and you have to become certified for it. And, I've done that, and I've also had the opportunity to have a dive master certify several of my friends. So I have been rebreather dive with other friends.
How deep do you dive? I mean, how deep is...
Well, these machines are certified for 199 feet. However, things get pretty dark down there, and when I'm really interested in photography, I've been to 100, but I've never been... I mostly dive no deeper than 60 feet. But that's mostly for exploring shipwrecks. We find almost everything that I'm interested in the surface to 40 feet.
And so would you think about having a book only of all your underwater sea life and those experiences?
Well, might think about that. That my photographic book does have a great many underwater pictures. Doesn't have the... I think there's a tiger shark in that and a variety of other sharks and a lot of beautiful sea life. It does not have the hammerheads, since we just did that last
Right.
month.
Right. Well, you're, it must be, you don't live a dull life, that's for sure. And what do you do when you're up there in New York in the Adirondacks?
Well, I have a gorgeous view. I have all my computer systems and beautiful audio system. I listen to a lot of music. I'm very eclectic in my love. I restored a beautiful 1937 Chris Craft, and I enjoy the scenic rides with that. I have a pontoon boat, which we use sort of as a practical boat. I can go through a little river or lake system down to a great delicatessen for lunch. We do that from time to time. And then I have a ski boat, which my kids love, but I don't use that anymore. And a couple of kayaks and canoes, and there's plenty of stuff to do here.
Yeah, obviously you do. And so, of all your traveling, if you could say the most exciting place that you've ever been or that you've ever seen, even if you haven't really participated in it exactly, if it's too far away, you couldn't get to it, what would you say? And I know that's really pushing you because there's so many places that you've been. But
well, Anita, I have been had so many wonderful opportunities. As you know, the photographic book covers much, much more than just what you can see from a boat.
Yep.
And it's because I was a member of YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and which throws you out at age 50, which I think is a good thing. But fortunately, there's life after YPO. It ought to be called OPO, Presidents Organization. But they're more polite and call it World Presidents Organization. And I traveled with them. Renate and I were just in Florence. We had a great trip. I mean, just as an example, the budget was a little high, but we really appreciated it. We ended up having dinner every night in a different, I would call it a palace, probably the wrong word. It was the homes of the Medici merchants a couple of 100 years ago.
Wow.
And just gorgeous places. And they really knocked themselves out. They had jesters, they had opera singers, they had all of the great silverware and chinaware, and really each dinner was an opportunity to see how those incredibly wealthy people lived a couple 100 years ago.
No, that's outstanding. That is absolutely
outstanding.
It
was a great trip. And, of course, Michelangelo's David is there. And
yes.
We had a couple of lectures about it and its characteristics and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Michelangelo also painted The Last Supper,
right.
But The Last Supper is not in Florence, so we didn't see it, but we had lectures on it. And as part of the lectures, they took us to 3 other churches that had other artist versions of The Last Supper. And it was interesting to see how the different artists interpreted it. In one case, all of the disciples had halos except Judas. Another one, Judas is sitting on the opposite side of the table from the rest of the disciples and Jesus. And then, some of them had knives, which you could either interpret as well. These were just the cutting, silverware. Other interpretations were that they were a little menacing. So as not being one with great religious training, I learned a good deal from seeing these various things. Anyhow, we had great lectures and many opportunities to photograph beautiful Florence. But on the other hand, it wasn't my first trip to Florence, and one of my favorite Florence pictures is in the Photographic Odyssey book.
Yes, that's you really have done so much, and if you weren't a real photographer, a lot of that would have been lost. You would have had it in your mind and your memory, but you had the joy and the luxury of having fantastic cameras before they were as good as they are today. So it's great. You're really leaving.
That's a funny story. People often say, "Well, what camera do you use?" And of course, the pictures are from a 60-year period. So I have to say, okay, which picture are you talking about? What year are you talking about? Because I go all the way back to film cameras, and I think my earliest pictures was using a camera my father had, and then as they improved with better lenses, better electronics, and then eventually getting into digital. And of course, since about 2000, all of my photography the last 16 years have been digital. And even then, several different cameras as the digital processing improves. So nowadays, of course, you can just take gorgeous pictures.
And do you ever entertain and show these pictures at parties at your home?
Well, if you were aboard Silver Cloud, 99 of the pictures, I think the Photographic Odyssey has 588 pictures. 99 of them are displayed on Silver Cloud. We do entertain on Silver Cloud. I've shown some of my pictures at the Photographic Center displaying, and at the Cultural Council, and mostly I say buy the book.
Right. Well, of course, the book is I forget how many pages. It's pretty large. How many pages? Was it 500? I don't remember.
Well, there are 588 pictures.
Yeah.
In each spread, at least one page is a full bleed, and then the opposite side is frequently 1, 2, or 3 pictures, because some of them don't deserve, full. What is it? 8 by 13 inches or whatever it is.
Well, it is a masterpiece, and I know it took you a while to do it. Not your whole life, but you were acquiring a lot of things, but it was well put together. And I still say that the Chamber of Commerce in Palm Beach and West Palm Beach should be, I hope that they're carrying it in their bookstores, because anyone wanted to come into this area, it says so much. It says a lot about you, but you, of course, show so many of the people who were the movers and shakers, and that was really
important. You're a wonderful promoter for me.
Well, I believe it. I know who you are. I know what you've done. I know about the whole place, and you have to be commended. And the thing I like as a gerontologist is that you have not stopped, and even though and you're concerned about Alzheimer's, you're still like 99% working on everything you can, and I am very proud to know you, and I think that we're very fortunate to have someone like you. You're really an inspiration, and that's the most important thing. That we live and then we pass away, and then what have we left? But you've left a lot. You are leaving a lot, and that's something to be very pleased about, and I know you are.
Well, I am. The Kravis Center makes me very proud. The
Yep.
Cultural Council has been wonderful. The kids at the Dreyfoos School really make me proud. We
Right.
just had some acceptances at just the most incredible schools, MIT, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, and of course the big art schools, Rhode Island School of Design, and what's the New York School?
Well, do you know these kids? Do you keep up with them? Or, I mean, you've met them, but then...
I've met a number of them. I go to school events. I have a subscription to our classical concerts at the Kravis Center, and sometimes Anita doesn't feel up to it. I typically invite a Kravis school kid to come. Sometimes Anita and I are both out of town, and make sure the tickets are used there. Yes, I participate. At Young Singers, the concert that I was just mentioning, had a number of Dreyfoos school kids in the thing. And then we also have arts camp at the Kravis Center, and I know there are a number of Dreyfoos school kids involved with that.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. I know that some of the children, of course, come from low-income families, and this could just be the spark that makes the difference in their life forever. So it is thrilling that you have taken all the luxury and the fact that you come from a family that really was able to give you so much, and then you've not stopped and you've created something. A lot of people don't do this. They take what they have, their money, and they don't give it out. But anyway, we've just run out of time, and it's always so wonderful talking to you, and I am really thrilled that you are having such a great life. And so thank you for taking the time to do this with us. I think people really love to hear about you and from you.
Well, thank you for your interest, and you have a great time.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, goodbye.
Take care now.